Welcome to Lesson 7 of the Special Operations Candidate course. My name is Matt, and as you should know by now, I'm the founder and the lead instructor here at the Special Operations Training Foundation. Now, in the last lesson, we talked about the two common threads that tie special operations careers together, and one of those being high risk. And now we're going to go a little bit more in depth into the high risk part itself. Let's talk about high risk and what it means. The term high risk, as we apply it here, means that there's a significant chance of either death or serious bodily harm when you participate in a special operations career. Now, there's a couple different ways that you could be at high risk. It could be in the actual performance of your duties, or obviously it could be in the performance of career training as well. If you go to work and there's a chance that you might not come back, a pretty good chance that you might not come back, or that you might not come back in one piece, you're probably in a high risk career. Now, I want to talk about something called the risk continuum. Obviously, there's no career that's labeled high risk and a career that is not labeled high risk. And if there is, it's based on somebody's definition of how dangerous it is in order to be called high risk. But it doesn't really work that way. What there is a continuum where things constantly change depending on the situation. And a career could be at a position of low relative risk or high relative risk on this sliding scale. Now, there's a few different ways we can evaluate stuff like that. We can look at an average risk and say that this particular career has a higher than average risk of death or serious bodily harm. And that's just, a number of days and a number of hours maybe served and then the number of injuries, and it's just some simple math. Or you could look at the worst case risk, as in what is the potential for something bad to happen here risk-wise. And this is more of a consequence thing where this is more of the actual risk itself. And if you take continuum and add in those consequences that I mentioned, you get something that we like to call a risk matrix. It's basically this sliding scale but in two dimensions at once. So you see we have a square here. And as you start here and go along the horizontal, you can see that careers would fall in here in increasing order of risk as far as average risk, like number of injuries per number of hours worked or number of deaths per number of hours worked, however you want to do the statistics. But then you add in consequences. What actually happens as a result of your bad luck, let's call it, in that actual profession. Sometimes the consequences may not be very bad. You may get injured, maybe it's a small injury, and you should count that when you look at your statistics, and you should pay attention to whether it is actually a serious bodily injury and what kind of injuries are we talking about. So obviously, as the consequences go up, we're talking more about death than we are about bodily harm, or obviously we're talking more about serious bodily harm than we are a non-serious, non-life-threatening bodily harm. So as consequences and risk go up, you wind up in an area that is both very risky on average, normally just due to the job, nature of the job, and worst case, if something happens, what are the potential consequences of that? You wind up with the most risky professions in both senses of the term up in this corner. Now, if you are up in this corner and start to look at the careers that fall into this corner, this is where you get how we come up with special operations. However, I don't want to jump there just yet. Let's look at some high-risk careers, and this is by statistics given by United States agencies like the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And these are, in fact, high-risk careers. Fishermen, logging workers, pilots, farmers, miners, and roofers are all very high-risk careers. I don't think anyone would really disagree with that unless they just don't know what the job hazards are. But obviously, they've written TV shows about fishermen and the dangers of being a fisherman, and logging worker, as a matter of fact. Pilot, I think everybody kind of understands. This is obviously more small aircraft than large aircraft. We're not talking commercial pilots, but smaller aircraft. Farmers have a very high risk of being injured on the job, not necessarily killed, but because of the machinery that they operate. Miners have their own inherent hazards, and roofers obviously just have a thing for falling off of buildings. So unfortunately, all of these careers are not in our definition of special operations. Now, why is that? Although we've done a risk continuum here, and we realize that the average risk for these guys is very high, and the worst case risk is potentially very lethal. For fishermen, of course, if you fall over, if you see the guys on the TV show The Deadliest Catch and they fall over, they don't have very long to get out in order to survive. So the potential consequences of their job are obviously very grave, and the risk is very high. However, because they're missing that component of public service, which is the other main common thread of special operations careers, we don't call these special operations careers. Now, having said that, our next lesson is going to be on defining what actually is in the public service in our sense of the term. And we're going to combine that with what I just talked about here to come up with exactly what careers that we are going to fall under our curriculum here at Special Operations Training Foundation. If you haven't done so, please like, subscribe, and definitely visit the website at sotfoundation.org. And if you'd like to contact any of us at the staff, all that contact information is at the very end of the video. Thanks, and see you next time.